Yo, what's up guys, Wolffact here and welcome to another video. Today's topic is very unique. This is the top 10 longest prison sentences served by innocent people. Now before I get into the video, be sure to leave a like, share and subscribe for more content, and let's get started. Kicking off our list with the number 10 spot, James Richardson. James was convicted back in 1967 of poisoning all of his 7 children. However, 21 years later, the poor man was released after the prosecutor, Janet Reno, and James's lawyer, Ellis Rubin, appealed to the decision, which was then found by the judge to be one-sided from the jury, formed of 12 white men. On to our number 9 spot, Daryl Burton. Daryl was in prison back in 1984 and convicted of killing a man in a gas station. However, the decision was ruled out in 2008, 24 years later, after evidence came forward suggested that Daryl was an innocent man and was imprisoned due to false claims. Those claims were made by witnesses who said that the shooter was a 5'5", light-skinned black man. However, Daryl was as tall as 5'10". Moving on to Stephen Phillips. In 2008, Stephen Phillips' name was proven innocent after he was wrongfully convicted 25 years prior back in 1983 of rape, after a DNA test pointed away from him. As a result, Stephen received $4.1 million in compensation, but we all know that no amount of money will bring back those 25 years. And our number 7 spot, Charles Chapman. Yet another man released in 2008. Charles Chapman was accused of raping a white woman back in 1981 and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. However, once again, a DNA test had proven the conviction invalid, and thus Charles Chapman, a 47-year-old of Dallas County, Texas, was able to taste freedom again. And we're almost halfway through with William Dillon. 2008 must have been one hell of a release here, with William Dillon, who was released in late 2008 for allegedly beating James Dvorak to death in Brevard County in 1981. Nevertheless, one of the factors used to convict Dillon, which was dog scent identification, was refused as evidence. Later DNA testing on the yellow shirt worn by the killer did not match that of Williams, and thus he was released. However, the story doesn't end there. Flash forward 3 years later, and William receives $1.35 million in compensation. And we're at the midpoint with Michael Anthony Green. On April 18, 1983, Michael Green was charged with aggravated sexual assault and was convicted when the victim identified him as one of her attackers. Thus, he was locked up for 27 years until October 2010, when DNA testing carried out on the victim's genes pointed towards 2 other men, Michael A. Smith and David Elder, 2 other criminals already in custody. Elder later confessed and confirmed the other 2 men involved were Michael A. Smith and Lawrence Mosley. However, due to the expiration of the statute of limitations, none of the 3 men were actually charged. On the other side, Green received $2.186 million in state compensation, plus a monthly annuity of $11,300. On to our number 4 spot, Glenn Ford. Now, Glenn Ford was exonerated in 2014, a year before his death, after a racist conspiracy saw him being convicted in 1984 and sentenced to death in 1988 for the murder of Isadore Roseman. What linked Mr. Ford to the crime was that he was actually the yard man for Mr. Roseman. The conspiracy was set up by the prosecutors to ensure that the jury and the judge were all Caucasian, along with confidential evidence being withheld. Luckily, in 2013, a mystery informant told authorities that the real culprit was Jake Robinson, and thus a year later, Glenn Ford was a free man. Unfortunately, and weirdly so, he was denied compensation by the state of Louisiana. Ford was actually eligible for $313,000 in settlement under Louisiana law. But the judge denied petition for the funds, stating that he likely had some role in the initial crime as he had been in possession of stolen goods when arrested. On to our number 3 spot with Cornelius Dupree Jr. On April 3, 1980, Cornelius Dupree Jr. was falsely charged with aggravated robbery of a male and female victims and the rape of the female victim in 1979. After false identification by both victims, he was sentenced to 75 years in prison without parole. However, in 2006, the Innocence Project launched an investigation on the case and performed DNA testing in 2010. This proved that Cornelius Dupree Jr., after 31 years of being wrongfully convicted, was an innocent man. Luckily for Dupree, he was awarded $2.47 million in state compensation. And we're almost done with James Bain. In 1974, 19-year-old James Bean was convicted of the kidnapping and raping of a 9-year-old victim in a baseball field in Florida. The victim mistakenly identified James as his rapist, and an investigation was opened, even though James's alibi of watching TV was backed up by his sister. Semen was found on the victim's underwear, but unfortunately DNA testing wasn't available back then. However, the blood group on the underwear was found to be B, and even though James was proven to have AB, he was sentenced to life in prison. Fortunately, in 2009, DNA tests results came back to prove otherwise, and after a whopping 35 years, James was finally exonerated. Luckily, he received $1.7 million in compensation. And we're at the #1 spot with Lewis Taylor. Now you may have heard of him. In April 3rd, 2013, Lewis Taylor experienced freedom for the first time in 42 years. On December 20th, 1970, the Tucson Hotel caught fire and 29 people sadly lost their lives that night. At that time, Lewis was seen helping people escape and was considered a hero until, because of racial profiling, he was accused with starting the fire. Unfortunately for him, the charges stuck and he was sentenced to 28 consecutive life sentences. Finally, he was released from prison due to the lack of evidence and racial discrimination. However, the prosecutors did not believe that he was innocent, and so he was not fully exonerated. When asked why he won't fight for a full exoneration, he simply replied with, "How should I give them another minute, another hour, another decade in prison for something I didn't do? I wanted my freedom." Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe. This has been your boy Wolffact. Howla chill later.